Okay, we're going to take the notes on cellular respiration. I'm going to try to fill it in here on the computer as we go. Okay. So cellular respiration is the process where cells break down glucose in order to release the energy in the form of ATP. Okay, so remember our analogy from class today. Glucose is the $100 bill, so we're trying to make those single dollar bills. Okay? And this process occurs in all living things. Okay, so not just, some people think, okay, plants do photosynthesis, and so it's just animals that do cellular respiration. But every single living thing, whether it's a bacteria or a plant or a fungus, every living thing has to break down the glucose to get their energy. Okay, so the process happens in 3 steps. The first step, we have glucose here. Okay, so you can see the glucose there, and it's going to get broken down. The very first step here, we're going to draw this in the picture, is called glycolysis. Okay, so glycolysis is the first step. Okay, and so we can see here the glucose is going to get broken down. We're going to get a net of 2 ATPs. Okay. From there, the molecules that are broken down from glycolysis, it creates a molecule called pyruvate. 2 of them actually, which are going to enter into the second part of this process, which is called the Krebs cycle, which some guy named Krebs named after himself. Okay, and so in this cycle here, we see coming out of it, again, 2 more ATPs, and then over here, out of this arrow here, okay, this is where the carbon dioxide comes out. Okay, so when you breathe in, you're breathing in oxygen, you're breathing out the carbon dioxide. Where did that come from? It actually came from your Krebs cycle. So the mitochondria of your cells are producing that carbon dioxide that you're breathing out. And then the last step of the process is called the electron transport chain, or for short, the ETC. Okay, and the electron transport chain is where we get most of the energy. It's something like 34 ATPs get produced from the electron transport chain. So that's where really the majority of the energy gets produced. Okay, required for the electron transport chain is oxygen. Okay, the oxygen is going to combine with the hydrogen ions from the process and is going to eventually create water. Okay. So let's just fill that in on the in words now as opposed to in pictures. Okay, so glycolysis, that word literally means glyco, meaning for glucose, and lysis, meaning to break apart. It means the breaking apart of glucose. So remember, glucose is a 6-carbon molecule, C6H12O6. You need to have that formula memorized if you don't already. So C6H12O6, that's glucose. It's broken down into 2 pyruvates. Those are what we call 2 3-carbon molecules. That's sort of the short way of referring to them. Okay, so basically, you started off with glucose, which was a 6-carbon molecule, and now it's been broken down into 2 3-carbon molecules. Okay, the net gain from glycolysis is 2 ATPs. Again, if you watch the other videos, 2 ATPs were invested and 4 were gained, so that's a net 2 ATPs. And this occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. And why that's important, okay, is because remember we just said a few minutes ago that all living things must perform cellular respiration. Okay, well, some living things don't have mitochondria. Okay, and so the glycolysis process happens in the cytoplasm because even things like bacteria are performing glycolysis. Okay, so if oxygen is present, then what's called aerobic respiration will continue on in the mitochondria. Okay, so we're going to talk about, there's aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. we're going to talk about aerobic respiration right now, which is glycolysis followed by the Krebs cycle on the electron transport chain. So from the Krebs cycle, the pyruvate enters the cycle, it's further broken down, lots of other molecules are added with it, and in the process, okay, more energy is released, okay, and we are creating ATP, right, and that other molecule you heard about in the video, the NADH, okay, which is carrying the H's, the hydrogen ions, and the electrons, okay, and then again, as I said before, this is where the CO2, the carbon dioxide we breathe out, is released as a waste product. Okay? And finally, the last stage is called the electron transport chain. The stream of electrons creates enough energy. Okay, so it's the electrons create this stream of energy, which actually then cause the hydrogen ions to build up inside the mitochondria, which then stream through the protons pump, which, as you saw in the video, which is what creates the energy to make the ATP. So what we're writing down is really a simplified version of this, of what we saw in the video. Okay, so what else? We have our oxygen here is required to absorb the electrons and the hydrogen ions, which is what creates the water. Okay. So in this class, in biology class, I'm always asking students, why do we breathe? And usually the answer is to live. And I know that's true, but here's the real answer, okay? Why do we breathe is because we need oxygen to participate in the electron transport chain, okay, so that our bodies can generate ATP so that we have the energy to survive, okay? So there's your answer on the test, okay, of why do we breathe. Okay, we're also breathing to get rid of the carbon dioxide from the Krebs cycle. Okay, so the overall equation for aerobic cellular respiration is glucose, so C6H12O6 plus oxygen, which is O2, okay, with an arrow here. Okay, now again, sometimes I put the ATP coming off of the arrow, just because when we compare this with photosynthesis, we see that we usually put the energy around the arrow. Okay, so C6H12O6 plus O2 yields ATP, carbon dioxide, plus water. Now this is not a balanced equation. Okay, we will talk about balancing it maybe later. And if you remember your chemistry, then you can balance that equation. Okay, so that is aerobic respiration. If you just flip to the back of your worksheet really quickly, okay, sometimes what if you don't have oxygen present? Okay, then what happens is something called anaerobic respiration. Okay, anaerobic means without oxygen. Okay, so sometimes when you're exercising, maybe you're not getting enough oxygen to your body, anaerobic respiration can happen. Okay, so this happens because no oxygen is present. And no more ATP is going to be generated, so this process is considered to be very inefficient. Okay, you do not want to be performing anaerobic respiration. It is not ideal, but sometimes it happens because if you don't have enough oxygen. Okay, where this usually happens in your body is in your muscles. Okay, and something called lactic acid fermentation is going to happen, where your body is trying to break down the glucose to get energy. Okay, this is especially when you're exercising. You're not getting enough oxygen. So again, it's all about the oxygen. You're not getting the oxygen, so your body can't break down the glucose, which it needs for the energy to exercise. And so your body starts to produce what's called lactic acid. So when your muscles start burning, okay, it's because you're actually building up acid in your muscles. Okay, and that's from trying to break down glucose without enough oxygen. Other living things that try to break down glucose without oxygen, okay, they do, instead of making lactic acid, they make alcohol. Okay, so alcohol fermentation, if you ever hear about fermenting things, so this happens in things like yeast and bacteria, certainly anything without a mitochondria. Okay. So they're, again, trying to break down the glucose to get energy. Okay, they're not trying to make alcohol. Alcohol is a poison. Okay, but when they try to break down the break down the glucose to get the energy out without oxygen, then they get some ATP, but they also produce alcohol in the process. So they can make alcohol. Okay, but this is how other stuff like cheese is made and other products that you need to ferment to make. I don't know, like miso. I don't know if anyone eats miso, but miso soup when you go out to a restaurant. Okay, so that is it for cellular respiration. Okay, goal is to make ATP from glucose. Remember your analogy, glucose is the $100 bill, ATP is the single dollar bill.